Immortal and Martial Dual Cultivation. Chapter 25. Distracted in the 11th Hour. Extracting a sufficient amount of tiger paw grass medicinal liquid was just a small part of the initial step. Next up was to extract the medicinal liquid from 3 other medicinal herbs. After taking a small break, Felton retrieved a saffron and held it in his hand. He tried to use his spiritual awareness to establish a mental connection with it. He focused his attention, and the green spear in his sea of consciousness took on the shape of a brook-like, long and jade green line. It travelled through the meridians in his arms and exited his body. The green line, which was invisible to the naked eye, made a connection with the brightly coloured saffron. Instantly, a bright red space appeared within Felton's consciousness, as though it was right in front of his eyes. This time, Felton gained a deeper understanding of these medicinal herbs in inner space. Those flowing red threads should be the medicinal property of the saffron. The area that had the densest amount of threads was the place with the most medicinal properties. Thus, he could afford to be careless when it came to the other areas. After a while, Felton opened his eyes and rescinded this strange state. After experiencing this mental connection, he now had a rough understanding of this spear in his sea of consciousness. The green spear could be a spiritual core consolidated after he awakened his spiritual awareness. However, he did not know what level of aptitude this spiritual core, which was as small as a green pea, was considered to be at. Gathering his thoughts, Felton circulated the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation once again, condensing the Purple Thunder through fire. He began to extract the medicinal liquid in the saffron, extracting a total of 50 drops of red medicinal liquid. Following that, he extracted the medicinal liquid of the star anise and spearmint, both of them yielding 50 drops of medicinal liquid each. Looking at the 4 porcelain bottles on the table, Felton took a breather and wiped the sweat off his forehead. The first step in refining the fasting pill had been completed. That alone had already exhausted half of all the essence in his body. The second step was to form the pill. It required the supplementation of an enormous amount of essence. If he came up deficient in essence whilst in the midst of this step, everything would be for naught. Felton could only temporarily give up on the proceeding with the second step, and circulated his cultivation essence technique to slowly restore the exhausted essence. Essence! Essence! At this moment, Felton desired nothing more than a larger capacity for essence. If he had a sufficient reserve of essence, then this would never have been an issue in the first place. He was only attempting to refine the most basic medicinal pill. If he were to try refining a pill of a higher grade, he would not even be able to last through the first step. After half an hour, Felton stopped cultivating. The essence in his body had been fully restored, which was now sufficient for him to carry on with the second step of cultivation. Picking up the Azure Dragon Medicinal Cauldron, Felton condensed the Purple Thunder through fire and thrust it into the opening for the fire on the Azure Dragon Medicinal Cauldron. The purple fire burned ferociously in the cauldron. First of all, he poured the tiger paw grass medicinal liquid in. Under the purification of the Purple Thunder through fire, the viscous liquid continued to churn, giving off a sizzling sound. The medicine cauldron began to give off a faint fragrance. Felton mentally kept track of the time and poured the second medicinal liquid in after a minute. After 4 minutes, the medicinal liquids in the 4 porcelain bottles were emptied into the medicinal cauldron. Felton then placed the cauldron lid on and continued to supply essence to the Purple Thunder through fire in the medicinal cauldron. An invisible thread connected to the Purple Thunder through fire in the medicinal cauldron, making the essence in his body flowed in a steady stream which kept the purple flames alive. This was the disadvantage of not having spiritual sense. If Xiao Chen could cultivate his Purple Thunder Divine Incantation to the second layer and attain spiritual sense, he could directly use it to control the strength of the Purple Thunder through fire. He would not have to wastefully spend his essence as he did at the present. Within the Azure Dragon Medicinal Cauldron, the 4 medicinal liquids of different colors continuously churned before fusing together, turning into a viscous liquid that was continuously spinning. At this moment, the smell of medicine started to turn denser in the room. Xiao Chen, who was without spiritual sense, was not able to see the situation inside the medicinal cauldron. He could only judge based on the fragrance that came out of the medicinal cauldron that the 4 types of medicinal liquid had already fused together. At this moment, he could no longer use a fierce flame to purify it. He had to follow the direction of the spinning ball of medicinal liquid, controlling the Purple Thunder True Fire to wrap around it from a distance. The Purple Thunder True Fire also had to slowly rotate in sync with it, and the temperature had to be adjusted. Sweat continuously trickled down Xiao Chen's forehead, as this was a delicate step that exhausted more essence than simply brute forcing a fierce flame to purify the medicinal liquid. Each time the flames made a complete revolution, Xiao Chen felt the reserve of essence in his body wither significantly. If he ran into a situation where he ran out of essence, then everything he had done so far would be for naught. The medicinal fragrance within the house took on another change. Xiao Chen could finally breathe easily. There was about a tenth of his essence left in his body. The situation that he was the most worried about, running out of essence, had fortunately not occurred. This bit of essence was enough to complete the final step in refining this pill. Under the purification of the warm flames, the medicinal liquid in the cauldron had already condensed into a rough, spear-shaped pill embryo. A faint fragrance wafted out from the cauldron. As long as the final step of solidifying it was completed, then this fasting pill would be completed. Xiao Chen opened up the cauldron lid, in which an even thicker fragrance wafted out and assaulted his nose. Looking at the rough pill embryo in the medicinal cauldron, Xiao Chen felt extremely content. For him to be able to make it all the way to this step without committing any major mistakes during his first refinement was very gratifying. If he could perfectly complete the final step, then it would be ideal. Xiao Chen's eyes seemed to burn with excitement, but his heart remained extremely calm. This final step was the most important step. There was no room for mistakes. Xiao Chen guided the Purple Thunder True Fire to slowly rise into the air, and the rough pill embryo similarly followed the purple fire and rose into the air. He stretched out his right hand, and the pill embryo surrounded by the purple fire slowly descended onto his palm. It was time to solidify it and shape it. With his attention fully honed in onto it, Xiao Chen's eyebrows were tightly knit into a frown. This would only happen in a situation when someone was concentrating very hard. Whoosh! The pill embryo spun rapidly within the flames. Xiao Chen did not even dare to let go of his breath. The sweat glistened on his forehead as it incessantly poured down his face, trickling downwards. The uneven pill embryo started to smoothen out and turn into a perfect spear. And even a faint glow began to surround the pill. Once this step was completed, could the fasting pill be considered a true pill? Xiao Chen pushed down ferociously with his hand, sending the pill back into the cauldron. After closing the lid, he began the final heating. At this moment, Xiao Chen did not dare to relent in his focus. Until the pill came out of the cauldron, he had not succeeded. However, there was not much risk anymore. Before this fasting pill could be considered complete, it simply needed another half a day to simmer. Second young master, supper is already ready. Do you want to eat it yet? Bang! Right at this moment, the sudden appearance of Power's voice caused Xiao Chen to lose focus. In the instant he lost focus, he did not control the flames in the medicinal cauldron properly. Thus, the medicinal pill that was almost completed shattered into pieces. From the other dragon head of the Azure Dragon medicinal cauldron, a stream of debris from the medicinal pill began to flow out. Damn! What are you doing here at this moment? Xiao Chen shouted angrily in the direction of the door at Power. All his efforts squandered just like that. It was not easy for the refining process to proceed all the way to this final moment. Xiao Chen's mood was soured to an extreme. His sweat-filled face coupled with his livid expression made him look very terrifying. When Power, who was outside, saw Xiao Chen angrily shouting at her, and then seeing the situation on the table, she knew that she was in trouble. Her tiny face had turned extremely pale from fright, and the tray of supper trembled in her hand as she held onto it. Tears began to trickle down from her eyes as she replied like a little mouse scared witless. Second young master, I did not do that on purpose. Xiao Chen, who had exhausted all his essence and entered an extremely weak state of mind, merely waved his hand impatiently. Go out. There's nothing for you to do here. After half a day, Xiao Chen recovered some of his strength. Then, he felt regret. What's wrong with me? It was just a failure at refining a pill. Why did I lose my temper at a little girl? Have I really begun fancying myself as a young master? With this little bit of strength and status, I have already started losing my temper in such a manner. In that case, how am I different from the Zhang clan and their prodigal sons? It was just a failed attempt at the refinement of a medicinal pill. If I failed the first time, I can always attempt it again. There's no need for me to vent my anger on a little girl. The more Xiao Chen thought about it, the more he felt that he was in the wrong. He got up and headed towards Power's room. The light in her room was not out yet. Xiao Chen, as he stood in front of the door, could hear the gentle sobbings coming from inside. Creak. He pushed the door open gently. Perhaps because she came back in a hurry, the door to her room was not locked and opened with a gentle push. When Bao, who was seated at the bedside, saw Xiao Chen push the door open and enter, she hurriedly wiped the tears away and shivered as she inquired carefully, Second young master, why are you here? Just now, I really did not do it on purpose. Oh, Xiao Chen, such an innocent young lady and you scared her to such a degree. You are really horrible. Xiao Chen scolded himself in his heart. He was not able to speak the words of apology he had thought of earlier on the way here. After he saw the supper that was placed on the table, a bowl of squid porridge, he replied, I am here for supper, as well as to check up on you. When Xiao Chen finished saying that, he picked up the squid porridge on the table and began to eat with gusto. It tasted pretty good. Normally, the kitchens would not provide supper, so this should have been made by Bao personally. It is very tasty. Did you make it yourself? Yes, I can cook pretty well. I have learned from my mother when I was young, Bao said in a soft voice. Looking at Xiao Chen, who seemed happier after eating the porridge, Bao asked tentatively, Second young master, are you still angry at me? Yes. Xiao Chen slammed the bowl on the table. His face appeared extremely stern. Bao's heart started to thump very hard in response. I'm just kidding with you. I am angry that you made too little squid porridge today. I am punishing you by making you make more tomorrow. Xiao Chen suddenly softened his expression into a smile. Bao Er's tear-stained face immediately lit up with a smile as she said in disbelief, "Really?" Xiao Chen got up and walked over to Bao Er, wiping away the tears on her face. He replied in a sincere tone, "Really, the squid porridge tastes very good. I should not have lost my temper at you earlier. Don't think too much of it and have a good sleep."